Well, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, from wherever you are in the world. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this virtual Nightingale 2020 conference. I want to say welcome back if you attended yesterday, and welcome if you have joined for us today for the first time. Welcome to day 2. So yesterday was amazing. We had some fantastic presentations, a great keynote speak, and some brilliant and informative panel sessions. The day was recorded, so if you missed it yesterday, with some editing, it will be available on our YouTube channel at the end of the week for you to use, and we really urge you to use this in your networks. You're very welcome. So good morning, afternoon, evening. My name is Greta Westwood. I'm the Chief Executive of this amazing nursing and midwifery charity, the Florence Nightingale Foundation. So this is 2020, it's nearly finished. It was the year of the nurse and the midwife, and it's certainly Florence Nightingale's bicentenary. Well, what a year, and certainly not the year we'd all planned. It was not a conference that we had planned either, and I had really hoped to be addressing 4,000 nurses and midwives together in a huge conference centre in London. But instead, I'm welcoming each one of you, a nurse or midwife from around the world. And I'm almost certainly speaking to each of you in your homes. So this slide shows the whole programme, and the greyed out area was the programme we had yesterday and the wonderful speakers that we have today. I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome our keynote speaker today, Carol Kefford from Nuffield Health. Nuffield Health is our strategic partner. We have panel chairs, panellists, and we also have a number of presentations that you'll be able to also see on our YouTube channel from nurses and midwives around the world who submitted an abstract, and these were then chosen to present for their work. So I want to thank you all for your support of the foundation in your time commitment to make this conference a success. We designed the programme with a mixture of keynote speeches, panel sessions and spoken presentations. And as I said, those that had submitted abstracts, we've turned these into 38 spoken presentations. They're all pre-recorded, and you'll be able to see those at various times throughout today. And as I said, they'll be available on our YouTube channel for you to use later across your networks. So we've all come together today to share new nursing and midwifery knowledge and our vast experience from all over the world. We have nurses and midwives who've registered for this conference and a number of speakers from all 7 continents. And this map shows the countries of origin. So we have the USA, Canada, mostly the UK, Nigeria, India, China, Japan and Australia. So a really special thank you if you stayed up very late to join in, and delegates, particularly those in Eastern Australian time, and those who've had a very early start to their days, those in West Coast time. So I am proud to announce that this conference is being sponsored by the Burdett Trust for Nursing. The Burdett Trust for Nursing has been a loyal supporter of the foundation for many years and gives very generous charitable grants for nurse-led and midwife-led projects across the UK. And we heard from Dame Christine Beasley yesterday about the support that these projects are starting to have and are impacting on patient care and health outcomes, not just in the UK, but in some cases internationally. And we also heard one particular project has been adopted by our government. So the plans for this conference, this Nightingale 2020 conference, started as long ago as January 2017, and with generous support from the Burdett Trust. And we're very grateful for that. A UK-wide steering group was established, and it was established to make sure that this global conference could be one that would be remembered in Florence's bicentenary. But of course that all came to a halt when coronavirus struck the world. But at the time that we cancelled the conference, we'd received over 900 conference abstracts, and we could have easily decided it was too difficult to organise that conference into a virtual conference, or we would delay it for a number of entirely valid reasons, given the current situation. But we didn't. You might know that Florence said at one point, I attribute my success to this. I never gave or took an excuse. So in the foundation, we follow that principle. When something looks like it's hard to achieve, it probably is, but we try it anyway. And our philosophy is we might always be pleasantly surprised. So we didn't want to lose the intellectual content of the effort that had been spent in submitting those abstracts. And we wanted to give nurses and midwives everywhere an opportunity to get together and celebrate and learn. So once again, a special thanks to the Burdett Trust for Nursing, who allowed us to transfer that conference into this virtual platform, albeit it's not the whole programme that was originally planned. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my extraordinary team for the hard work they've taken to make yesterday and today possible. It really is the first conference in the history of the foundation that was being delivered on a virtual platform. So a little bit about the Florence Nightingale Foundation. Florence Nightingale died in 1910, and it was decided at that time by the international nursing community to establish a living memorial for her work. The idea was eventually proposed by this lady shown on this slide, Ethel Fenwick, and it was eventually approved at the International Council of Nursing Congress in 1929. And the Florence Nightingale Foundation, as we know it today, was established in Great Britain and has been supporting nurses and midwives since 1934. And many of our nurses and midwives become scholars of the foundation. And indeed, we heard from one of those yesterday, Ruth May, who's the Chief Nursing Officer for England. The Chief Nursing Officer for Northern Ireland is also a scholar, as is our keynote speaker today, Carol Kefford. So the foundation had planned quite a celebration this year, as you might imagine, the 12th of May marking Florence's bicentenary, and we'd scheduled a host of activities. And no doubt all of those celebrations that we were going to do would have been repeated across the world by nurses and midwives, excited that 2020, the World Health Organization designated Year of the Nurse and Midwife. But whilst we paused all our events, 2020 has nonetheless been the year of the nurse and midwife, a year when every nurse and midwife has been called to support the COVID-19 pandemic. Really, what dedication, honour, and in some cases, the ultimate sacrifice we've seen as our professionals courageously keep our population safe. So I'm delighted, as is the whole nursing midwifery community, that 2020 will be a continuation of this important year, a time when we can truly honour our nurses and midwives, celebrating Florence's bicentenary, and importantly, keeping her legacy alive beyond 2020. So some of you might be wondering why we still celebrate her work. And Florence on this slide had said that she'd like to think that the world could continue her work even beyond her death. So she died in 1910, and 110 years ago, we still honour all that she achieved. Today, in these 2 weeks, so today 166 years ago, Florence was in transit to care for the ill and injured soldiers in the Crimean War. She left London with 38 nurses, and she left London on the 21st of October 1854, and she arrived at Scutari in Turkey on the 4th of November, so that journey taking 2 weeks. The 38 nurses she were chosen from a call to action. It was her call to ask for nurses to volunteer to join her in her travels to go to Scutari. And I guess that's very similar to the requests that we have had during COVID-19, where many nurses, thousands of nurses and midwives returned to our professional registers. So what did Florence do in Scutari that is so relevant today? And I would suggest that the parallels are striking. So the concept of hands, Florence used the data to influence the political power base in the UK, and she negotiated improved conditions for soldiers. Her famous polar chart, which you might be able to see behind my shoulder, provided the mortality rate evidence that soldiers were dying not from their battle wounds, but from infectious diseases. And Florence really understood at that time that it was the washing of the hands that was her first principle of infection prevention and control. And she famously said, "Every nurse ought to be careful to wash her hands very frequently during the day. If her face too, so much the better." Our second principle that we've learned during COVID-19 is about space. So when Florence arrived in Scutari, she was appalled at the conditions in which the soldiers were expected to recover from their injuries. Men lay on the cold, wet earth and makeshift floors, often in overcrowded rooms. And you can see in this slide some of the conditions that they were expected to recover. There were no supplies to manage the thousands of soldiers needing attention, and there weren't even clean dressings. So she immediately established the barracks as a hospital. Beds, when they arrived, were placed at a safe distance from each other, and so limiting the risk of cross-infection. The design of this hospital, the Nightingale ward system, has been repeated across the world, and seen most recently in the build of the NHS Nightingale hospitals. So Florence really had developed the role of the professional nurse, and she sparked worldwide healthcare reform through her avid interest in data and evidence. Without doubt, she was an amazing influencer, and she used that data to make her point, and it is that data that she used to reform the health and social policy. And we heard yesterday about the State of the World's Nursing Report. We asked ourselves the question, can you imagine what Florence would have done with those data to influence change? So Florence, we continue to celebrate her. We continue to celebrate Florence, the pioneer, the statistician, the influencer, the hospital architect, the trailblazer. And she was the person who never took no for an answer. And it's really her early work in infection prevention and control that remains our practice today as we strive to save thousands of people across the world, preventing the spread of COVID-19. So the conference here today and yesterday is to celebrate her 200 years. And importantly, we want to shine a light on the work of nurses and midwives, demonstrating the leadership roles that you all have had and the impact that you are making across the world. And we really want to shine a light on each one of you. I suggest you are here because you make the changes to improve global health. You want to do that. And imagine if you all picked up the Florence Nightingale baton and did as she did. As a pioneer and leader in public health, it's fitting her legacy is being used to shine a light on nurses and midwives every day worldwide. So I would suggest every nurse and midwife today listening to this conference is also her legacy today. So I want to shine a light on some of the work that we've been doing since COVID-19 struck the UK. As a small nursing and midwifery charity, we were reliant on our whole programme of activities, but instead we decided we wanted to contribute and support the nurses and midwives on the front line. And we developed a programme which we've called Nightingale Frontline. And this video was shown for the first time yesterday. So you, as day two, are its second exclusive audience. And I just want to pick out a few things of the type of support that we've offered nurses and midwives during this time. Thank you. If you could start the video.
The Florence Nightingale Foundation exists to develop the leadership potential of nurses and midwives, empowering them with the confidence and courage to influence policy and help change the world of healthcare for the better. We provide year-long scholarships for nurses and midwives, as well as a range of bespoke leadership programs in collaboration with our partners. Since March 2020, all of health and social care has been affected and disrupted by COVID-19. Understanding the impact that this pandemic would have on nurses and midwives, we created the Nightingale Frontline Leadership Support Service, a brand new programme designed to offer some socially distanced, emotional and well-being support, both during and after the crisis. During the sessions, groups of 6 nurses or midwives come together in virtual meetings with a trained facilitator. Each of them becomes a coach, a client, and a peer, and at times they just listen to the others. From the first weeks of the pandemic, the groups proved to be an extremely powerful space for nurses and midwives to find their own solutions to their own issues. As a foundation working to continue the legacy of Florence Nightingale, we felt a responsibility to share with the world the themes, experiences, and lessons that emerged. While it wasn't everywhere, in many places, under the guise of crisis management, a hierarchy of command and control was seen as essential to manage the COVID-19 response. Senior leaders issued policy from the top down, while nurses and midwives felt ignored and undervalued. To make matters worse, many were moved to different clinical areas, cutting them off from the colleagues that they knew and trusted, their wider support networks, and their normal routines. This culture of sudden change led to resentment and low morale, which in turn brought out disruptive behaviours from frontline staff, meaning even the best policies were received with scepticism and mistrust. One of the key themes that came out of the Nightingale Frontline Leadership Programme was courage, and we identified 6 forms of courage enacted by nurses and midwives at all levels of the NHS that enabled parts of the organisation to move away from command and control and towards a more collective leadership. The first is authenticity, the courage to make a commitment to share genuine emotion and respond genuinely to our colleagues' emotions. The second is transparency, the courage to share openly what was known and, crucially, what was not known about how to respond to the virus. The third is uncertainty, the courage to continue to do the next right thing and the best we can with our incomplete knowledge. The fourth is the courage to challenge, advocate, and question. The best decisions are usually made by those closest to the problem. To work, new policies and processes need to be able to be challenged from the ground up. The fifth is the courage to be vulnerable. This means being a role model and demonstrating rather than describing positive behaviour, sometimes even showing vulnerability so that those around us know that it's okay to prioritise self-care and ask for support. Last on our list is the courage to communicate, to be unafraid to tell the truth, even when it's difficult for people to hear. No one understands frontline care like the nurses and midwives who administer it. To ignore this invaluable resource in our strategic decision-making is a phenomenal and negligent waste. At the Florence Nightingale Foundation, we want every nurse and midwife to be empowered to make their voice heard, to share what they know and lead by example, no matter who they are or what position they hold. If you're interested in attending one of our Nightingale Frontline Leadership sessions, would like to contribute to our work, or would just like to find out more about what we do, please visit our website today.
So can I introduce you to the Florence Nightingale Museum? The museum is situated at St Thomas Hospital in London, and some of you will have visited over the time, but certainly since lockdown, the museum has not fully reopened. And so it's developed a short 10-minute video detailing Florence's life. And so it can bring the museum to you in your homes, on your computers. So the video will be available to you over these last two conference days. So please register if you'd like to have a virtual tour of the museum. So the museum is not just about Florence and her life, but it's more about using that example and bring it fully into modern day. But particularly the museum would like your comments about what the museum can do that would really make a difference. So if you have any comments about how the museum could change, they would very much welcome any questions and responses to David at davidg@florence-nightingale.co.uk. So the Florence Nightingale Foundation is a very small charity. Whilst it's been going for a number of years, we do rely on donations to support the work that we do for nurses and midwives. So just a little plug here, if you did like the music that played before the conference started, this is a couple duo who have kindly agreed to dedicate some of them proceeds from their music sales to the Florence Nightingale Foundation. So the conference today is for you. We want you to pose your question and answers in the question and answers section, and pose those to the panel sessions. So all panelists will stay on after each of the sessions and try to answer as many of your questions as possible in the time available. And we hope that today, yesterday, this 2-day conference will go some way to say thank you to nurses and midwives everywhere. And on behalf of the Florence Nightingale Foundation, I want to say thank you for all that you do every day. I'm so proud to be a nurse right now, and I never want you to stop thinking about how you can be the best nurse or midwife you can possibly be. Florence said, unless we're making progress in our nursing year every month, every week, take my word for it, we are going back. And she taught the world a lesson that cannot be unlearned. We are her legacy today. So thank you. I enjoy the rest of the conference. Before we hand over to Mary Watkins, our president, I'd like to invite back again Dame Yvonne Moores. Dame Yvonne Moores is our wonderful chair of the foundation and a legend in nursing. Dame Yvonne has held the post of Chief Nursing Officer for England, Wales and Scotland, and that's never been performed, or that's not been done before. So we've welcomed Dame Yvonne Moores back. Dame Yvonne was chairing a session yesterday on global health, but unfortunately there was a technical issue, and she's asked if she could just come back and spend 5 more minutes with you before we hand over to Mary Watkins. So thank you, Dame Yvonne.
Thank you very, very much, Greta. That was a super intro to our day 2, and thank you for allowing me to hijack just a few minutes of your slot to say something of what I didn't have the opportunity to say yesterday. It is to reinforce what Greta has said about this conference. This is, for nurses and midwives around the world, a seminal occasion. We all know it is the year of the nurse and midwife, that WHO agreed that, and the celebrations that we're able to have for Florence's 200th. But we must not miss the opportunity that this year gives us. And that was the thinking behind setting up this, what was going to be a major global international conference face-to-face in London. But this event is picking up the baton, and the objective of our conference planning was, yes, to celebrate full power celebrations of nurses and midwives' contribution and roles across the world. But secondly, and as importantly, I'd suggest, it is that we set out the future agenda for our professions across the world. It is to take Florence Nightingale's legacy forwards, and over these 2 days to debate, to discuss, and to work out what that agenda might be. We chose very carefully the 4 themes of the conference that we're now running forwards in our virtual panels. Professional practice, as David Benton yesterday set before us what the future path of nurse regulation might look like. We heard something of the roles and the recognition that professional practice needs to further receive. We heard the global health perspective. Of course, COVID yesterday and all that Howard gave us of the dire needs and the issues that that has created. We heard, of course, of this wonderful report on the state of world's nursing and midwifery from WHO. We heard there are going to be 6 million shortage of nurses by 2030. A huge global health requirement to develop public health nursing and roles and influence of nursing across the world. And today, impact to develop further our evidence base and to be able to articulate to powers, governments, influencers, what that impact of our professional role and work is. And of course, digital, we'll be hearing this is the future. Of course, it will reshape some of the way we deliver and carry out our roles and interface with our patients and families in the future. You as participants are very, very important people yesterday and here today, because you are going to help us decide that future agenda and what that looks like, what the questions need to be that need to be driven forwards. It's as a result, I'm going to suggest, of this conference that we will be able to go to WHO to develop future resolutions to strengthen nursing and midwifery that will go to governments across the world to action. It will be Florence Nightingale Foundation with our partners, the ICN, the ICM, nurse regulators across the whole world, and most of all, linking in with the Nursing Now campaign. As we heard yesterday, 700 groups around 126 countries across the world are there to work together, all of us, to shape that agenda, but then to drive it forwards. So, as Greta has said, and I reiterate, the question is, what would Florence Nightingale be doing and saying right now to influence the future of the health and well-being of the peoples of the world? It's in our hands to help answer that and then to drive it forwards. So well done again to the team at F&F. And this really leads me in to introduce our speaker, the president of the Florence Nightingale Foundation, our great supporter and ally, Baroness Mary Watkins, sits in our House of Lords in the UK as a top influencer and spokesman, not just on nursing and midwifery matters, but also on issues that affect the health and well-being of the people of the United Kingdom. She is a great ally, but also she has been at the forefront as co-chair of Nursing Now, but also in driving forwards and ensuring that WHO set up the work and took it forwards to produce this world report on nursing and midwifery. It's a real first, a very important first, and it gives us so much to be able to build on. And Mary has given us that. So Mary, thank you for all that you have done and given. We know that this is also about working with you as we take this agenda forwards. So thank you for joining us and being part of this wonderful conference. albeit virtual, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you very much, Mary.
Well, thank you very much, Yvonne. I want to start by welcoming everybody here on behalf of the Foundation, and to say that at the moment it looks as if we have 163 participants. Let's put that into perspective. And the perspective is that there are 27.9 million nurses in the world at the latest measure, which of course was 2018. So you can understand the influence you could have if you ripple out things that you have thought about and learned as a result of this conference. If everybody attending today touched 25 people, that would get us up to the 4,000 that we hoped to have at the large conference that we couldn't arrange because of COVID. If those 4,000 then reach out again and manage to explain to the world the huge influence that nursing has, how many more people can we get to join our profession and help the really severe problem in lower and middle income countries, where there is a need probably to increase the current nursing workforces at least 7-fold, as that is where the greatest paucity is presently placed, which of course means it becomes impossible to achieve the WHO strategic goal of basic healthcare for everybody across the globe by 2030. That is the key challenge to us. And it isn't significantly different to the challenge that Florence Nightingale faced at Scutari. Because though we focus on that work, it was the ripple effect that she had not only with the 38 nurses that she took out with her to Scutari, but when she then went on to set up the nursing school at St. Thomas's and developed leaders that spread initially across the United Kingdom and then further afield to take the absolutely vital message of professional nursing. And she also recognized that professional nursing was not only to be hospital-based, because if you remember, most people were nursed at home until certainly the Second World War. We have seen the development of nurses in the community, and the work that we've done through Nursing Now and a book that that Lord Nigel Crisp has just published really emphasizes that health is made at home and hospital should be for repairs. And therefore the role we play in public health, both in explaining the complexities of cross-infection, that adequate nutrition is vital for human development, that education is a pathway to freedom for so many people across the world, particularly women, and that we cannot depend, and COVID has shown us this so clearly, we cannot depend on containing illnesses in our own countries anymore. When Ebola broke out, I was in a very heated debate about the extent of the finance that the government was going to commit to try and ensure that Ebola was ably managed in Africa. And there were some people who thought it was a disproportionate spend. And I can remember standing up and saying, if we don't spend this money to help the people that have Ebola and prevent its cross-infection outside Africa, we will have lost the global security battle in terms of the transfer or the transmission of the disease. Some of those people who voted against the decision have come up to me since COVID-19 and said, COVID-19 has taught us the importance of health security and good health across the globe, because unless we achieve that, nowhere in the globe is safe. What is sad is that people couldn't listen initially to sound data. And we know that Florence was particularly good at sound data. She was a feisty leader who was very keen on observation and learning from observation. And she said that one of the great things we needed to teach nurses was how to undertake good close observation in practice and be able to describe the situation that patients were in. She was also very resilient. She was often knocked down. She wrote letters to the Times. People wrote back criticizing her. Not surprisingly, once or twice she took to her bed because people weren't listening to her, because she was developing the evidence base that would inform nursing for at least the next 200 years. When she was in a one-to-one relationship with a patient, we know that she was compassionate and kind, but we also know that she could be really determined and tenacious. And it is interesting in this 200th year of her birth, the anniversary of her birth, that the National Statistics Association in London is very keen to claim her as one of their own as well. Now, those attributes that I've described of Florence, actually, I've used her name, F for feisty, L for leader, to think these things through. And I want to just go to Dame Yvonne and to Greta. When I took on the presidency of the Florence Nightingale Foundation, it was going through a period of change. And genuinely, at one point, we thought, can we survive? And should we use the 200th anniversary as an opportunity to say, is it time to move forward and perhaps rename the Florence Nightingale Foundation? It is absolutely clear that that is not the thing to do, that Florence is an internationally recognized leader, and that the changes that we're now developing as a result of Dame Yvonne's chairmanship and Greta's leadership as chief executive is that we are becoming increasingly global and increasingly embracing different types of nurses and recognizing that mental health, learning disability, public health nursing is equally important to acute hospital nursing. And that hasn't always been the case, because I think the Nightingale Foundation grew originally from trying to improve hospital-based care. But if we move to COVID now, as so ably outlined, hand washing is key. But what is also interesting is if you take the COVID as a word, C for compassionate, we have to be compassionate, particularly to those that we now know are suffering from the effects of long COVID, which we have so much more to learn about. It requires really close observation of people who are acutely ill as they change their healthcare status with COVID, and also what are the long-term effects. So the observation, the O in COVID that Florence talked about, is also important. I have here, and I am just going to hold it up, and I don't think you can see it unless I put it right in front of my face. But this is Notes on Nursing by Florence, and it's the 150th anniversary reprint. And maybe we need to think of a 200th anniversary reprint, which I hope would have bigger text, because this is really tiny. But in it, it talks about restricting visits to patients in order to protect cross-infection. And we've had to do this during COVID, and we know that has all sorts of problems. And nurses have really stepped up to the plate and ensured that they have connected wherever possible patients to their families and loved ones through the kind of innovative techniques we're using today for this conference. So that's the first V in COVID. But I want to use V for one other thing, so it's a V squared. Florence Nightingale was clear that adequate ventilation was vital and that clean air was vital. Well, we've got Greta Thunberg telling us about clean air, and she's so right. But ventilation, we are now learning, is something that we've got to build into all our built environment in a much better way, in that some offices are clearly harbours of infection because we haven't got ventilation right in some new buildings. So those of you that are going to be involved in hospital design or community healthcare clinic design, think about that. The I in COVID is for information. Everybody is saying that we have used COVID to advance the changes in healthcare in 6 months in a way that might have taken a decade under normal circumstances. Let's harness that information and see how we can take it forward and continue the rapid increase and cost-effective care so that we can reach the entire global population with basic human rights of healthcare. And then the D in COVID, well, we come back again. Turn your information into data in the way that Florence did, and use it to feed your arguments for change and development. I wish everybody who's on this conference call well in their future career, and just say, never ever believe you can't do it. What you need to do is work closely with really good people. And we have at our Florence Nightingale Foundation, Greta, who I believe, and I've just taken her GRETA, is a genuinely authentic global leader who is resilient, who is using education to enhance the profession, who is a real team player. She's got a great team playing around her now. And she has the tenacity to see that advancing practice in an authentic manner is going to mean that there will be somebody sitting in a huge conference 100 years now, recalling today. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much indeed, Mary. Gosh, you always give us so much to think about. A feisty leader, that's what we've all got to be. Hugely resilient and very determined. I think we will take that away, but we will also take a new meaning and thought about what COVID is, and Greta, of course. Thank you so much, Mary, and for being with us, but most of all for your contribution. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Next on our programme is today's keynote speaker, Carol Kefford. I know Carol very well indeed, and I'm absolutely delighted she accepted the invitation to be part of this conference and deliver this keynote. As you know from her bio, she's the clinical director and chief nurse at Nuffield Health, and she was the person instrumental in organising for Nuffield Health to be our corporate partner this year. She's had a stunning nursing career, and she certainly is a feisty and determined leader, but she's also one of our star scholars of FNF. So she wears a military hat as well as the Colonel Commandant of our Queen Alexander's Royal Army Nursing Corps, and she looks wonderful in uniform as well. So Carol, thank you so much, and over to you.
Thank you, Dame Yvonne. I'm not sure how I follow on or live up to that introduction, but good morning, everybody. And thank you to the Foundation for the invitation to speak today. It really is a very, very great honour. This is going to be a personal reflection on the last 8 months. I'm going to tell you some stories and I'll make some observations and then look forward to the possibilities and what I imagine the future might hold. I'm delighted that all 31 Nuffield Health hospitals have been working with the NHS during this pandemic. We've treated over 150,000 NHS patients to date, and because we're a charity, being part of this national effort sits very well with our values. It's by no means just Nuffield Health though, is it? In this country, it's brought a collaboration across our health and social care sectors, the NHS, independent sector, primary care, mental health, volunteer, the military, and the sometimes forgotten army of carers among families and friends. It's needed us all, and it'll continue to need us all for some time. But this is very much a global problem, and across the world, however healthcare is organised, this indiscriminate and bewildering disease has had an impact on us all. Collaboration can be challenging though, especially in times of such turbulence, but a challenge is a uniting force when you face it together. And facing to it together is just what we've done. In the process, we've built new relationships, we've learnt about each other, and most importantly, we've learnt from and with each other. And sure, there can be friction and misunderstandings, but in working through those together, we forge stronger relationships, closer collaboration, and we make a bigger difference for our communities, patients, clients, and for each other. I've started by talking about the wider context of healthcare rather than moving straight into nurses and nursing, because although the focus today is nurses and nursing, wherever we are in the world or in healthcare, we're part of a whole system. And even those of us who effectively work on our own are part of a wider system somehow. I raise this because I think it's important to remember that nursing isn't something that happens in isolation. If we only ever talk about ourselves as nurses and to ourselves as nurses, we're caught in an echo chamber. And if we're caught in an echo chamber, we won't have the influence or the impact on improving health globally that I think we're capable of. So, with that duly noted, let's move on to reflect on the last 8 months. And I'm very proud indeed that I work for a charity that champions nursing everywhere and therefore seized the opportunity to support the foundation. And this was particularly in their vision to recognise and celebrate all that's great about our profession on an international level and shine a spotlight on nursing and midwifery leaders as we honour Florence Nightingale's legacy. But it's more than that. It's also the Foundation's aspiration to mobilise the voice of nursing and midwifery in health policy agendas. And it wasn't just the Florence Nightingale Foundation who had ambitious plans to shine that spotlight during the International Year of Nurse and Midwife. It only took me a quick Google, and across the world I found organisations with the same intent. And I think this worldwide effort is summed up by the Nursing Now movement. To improve health globally by raising the profile and status of nurses worldwide, influencing policymakers and supporting nurses themselves to lead, learn and build a global movement. So that's a global movement to raise our voices and improve health. What an opportunity. And what a way to celebrate Florence Nightingale. But then this happened. And ringing in my ears still are the words of the Chief Nursing Officer England, Dr. Ruth May. At her summit in March, she said, "We face the greatest challenge in health and social care in at least a generation." But she didn't leave it there. Ruth also said, "This is our time. This is our time." And I think it is. So bearing in mind the points I've made about the collaboration between sectors, the challenges of that collaboration, and the lessons we're learning, I'd like to tell you some stories and offer some reflections and try and bring this to life. Over just 3 days, our Ipswich hospital converted their outpatient department into a chemotherapy suite. And this was so that their local NHS oncology unit could move in to quickly shield their vulnerable cancer patients. And this wasn't just a matter of moving furniture and equipment, although we did do plenty of that too. It involved ripping up carpets over a substantial area and laying new floors. Quite an effort. But it's more about the environment. It's about those relationships and finding new ways of working. When I visited Ipswich, I heard all about the anxiety and the early concerns of our nurses and healthcare assistants. But they were far more interested in telling me about how much they'd learned from their NHS colleagues and how much they'd learned about their own ability to adapt and to change at considerable pace. And their pride and their confidence just shone through. Lift and shift became the phrase of the moment as across our hospitals, NHS departments simply moved in, lock, stock and barrel. In our Oxford hospital, we absorbed the John Radcliffe's TAVI service into our cardiac catheter lab. And this was a real team effort. NHS and Nuffield Health, doctors, technicians, nurses, ODPs, they blended together into one unit to maintain that service. And one of the consultants told me that he believed at one point nearly half the TAVI procedures in the countries were carried out in that lab. Talking to those involved, I heard how their initial concerns had quickly been dispelled as they pulled together as one team, learning about and from each other as they went. Our Plymouth hospital hosted their nearby NHS Trust's chemotherapy suite in their operating theatre, and the oncology department on the ward, and the minor injuries unit in our outpatients department. And it's worked so well that the minor injuries unit is still there. Our Plymouth theatre teams then relocated to their local NHS trust and to another independent provider, Care UK. So that's a three-way mix. And make no mistake, this was very hard as they were taken away from their usual place of work, but with support and orientation, they too gained a greater awareness of the different working styles and the practices of other locations. The NHS and the Nuffield Health nurses in Plymouth will tell you how their experience has opened their eyes into each other's worlds. Both teams acknowledge now how their views have changed, how their preconceptions were in fact misconceptions. The Nuffield team have a greater understanding of working in a large teaching hospital and all the constraints of that. And for the NHS team, there's a recognition that the independent sector isn't a soft option. Everyone's picked up new ways of working that they'll now take back and develop in their own setting. One of our most moving stories is from our Woking hospital, where for many years the bulk of their work was elective orthopaedics, general surgery and assisted conception. Caring for patients who'd got some but never severe comorbidities, there hadn't been a death at that hospital for 13 years. They were asked by their local trust if they could stop all elective work and convert to a hospital solely for end-of-life care for COVID potential and COVID positive patients, and without hesitation they agreed. 2 palliative care nurses from Ashford St Peters ran the training, and then they worked alongside our teams who quickly adapted to this very, very different world. Now remember too that in the early days of COVID, no visitors could see their loved ones even at the end of their lives, and this added to the emotional burden for everyone. 34 of our patients died, and this is a very small hospital. But in spite of that emotional burden, again, the nursing spirit shone through, and they found not only ever more creative ways to care for their patients and support their families, but they cared for each other too. They planted a rose garden in memory of their patients so that when lockdown ended, their families would have somewhere to visit and reflect. The only time I've ever finished a visit to a hospital by walking into the car park and bursting into tears was after I visited Woking. And they were tears because it was such a raw and real exposure to what nursing means and the difference our profession makes. They were tears because I was just so proud of that team. And they were tears because I'd just seen the very best of nursing leadership. Similarly, talking to our NHS colleagues who embedded into our hospitals, I've heard about their initial reluctance to move into unfamiliar territory, their preconceptions and their expectations. Fortunately, they were keen to tell me that they too had quickly overcome their concerns, settled and enjoyed the experience. And this isn't just new relationships and collaboration between a Nuffield Health Hospital and one local trust. In several cases, it was 2 or 3 local trusts. So we and our NHS colleagues were integrating up to 4 teams and 4 different ways of working into one site. You can just imagine how much we've all learnt, how much good practice has been shared, and how many new ideas have surfaced as a result of all this. There are many more similar stories from across Nuffield Health, and I'm sure you've all got your own stories. But I'd like to look more widely now, and I'm going to tell you about Andrea. Andrea is an orthopaedic specialist nurse working at the Sherne Clinic in central London. Andrea's worked in the independent sector and in orthopaedics for many years because that was her choice. It was her choice to care for elective rather than acutely ill patients. It was where she felt her skills lay and where she felt she could contribute the most. But when the pandemic started, Andrea made a different choice, and with quite some trepidation, made the brave move to work at the Nightingale Hospital in London, a very, very different environment. In one shift, Andrea witnessed 6 patients die of COVID-19, and you can imagine that this was a very difficult experience for her. Although that's not what Andrea dwells on. What Andrea will tell you is how grateful she was to be supported by her nurse colleagues from other NHS and independent hospitals, and the difference that that made. Now, these stories are examples of many things. That nurses are brave. We will go where our skills are needed for our patients rather than where we're comfortable. That we look after each other wherever we're from, and regardless of how well we know each other. Andrea now believes that this experience has given her the confidence and the skills to pursue far wider career opportunities in the future, both in the NHS and in other clinical disciplines. And I hope she does, because she will then communicate and transmit that confidence, and she can use her lived experience to encourage others to make that leap. I'm going to turn now to the military. And there were some very bright spots of that calming confidence emanating from military nurses working across the country. These are nurses who'd worked in field hospitals in Iraq, Kosovo, Afghanistan, the Sudan, and at the very, very sharp end in Sierra Leone during the Ebola crisis. Those I've spoken to tell me they had a strong sense of going on an operational deployment, only this time without leaving home. These nurses pulled on their inner reserves of experience, their certainty that they could do this. And so their calming confidence rippled out. Their presence in wards, theatres and critical care units made others feel, we've got this and we can do this. I have a very personal story and a reflection from a different sector again. And it's about my much loved 97-year-old aunt who died recently in her care home. Let me tell you about Hilda. She was frail and muddled, but always the lady. She'd gone through the war, travelled the world, calmly dealt with life's disappointments and highlights. She loved a party, cake, and seeing her many friends. So lockdown could have been agony for her, but it wasn't. And it wasn't because of the love, sensitivity and compassion of the team who cared for her. They really, really knew Hilda. They knew to cut the crust off her sandwiches just how she liked them. And if she was reluctant to eat, then try cheese and biscuits and a glass of red wine, as that always went down well. They knew to talk to her about her life on the farm as a young girl, or running the family business with her husband, my Uncle Peter. They helped her to paint her nails or to FaceTime me so we could have a chat. And even in her final days, I noticed they made sure Hilda had her beads on and wore a brightly coloured top, just as she would have done when able to look after herself. And this didn't just help Hilda, of course, it helped me, it helped my brothers and our many friends. So focus on those in your care and your impact ripples far beyond. And that's nursing, and that's the difference we make, not only to one patient, resident or client at a time, but to their family, their friends, and those people who may not be so visible, but who also need that care. But I have another observation. My aunt's care home was well led, and it was that leadership that enabled the nurses and the care assistants to flourish. It was well led overall, but where my aunt lived was especially well led by Hannah. Now let me tell you about Hannah. She's just 27 years old, but has the wisdom and insight of a nurse leader with many more years' experience. It's instinctive, it's just in there, and it absolutely came to the fore when they too faced the impact of the COVID pandemic. But now it needs nurturing so that it'll flourish and grow, so that Hannah in turn will nurture and develop other young nurse leaders who will guide yet more nurses towards their potential. And we have all of us got a part to play in that continuum of development. Somewhere way back, a wise ward sister in Manchester, Lynn, got hold of me and gave me a big push. And while I was wobbling about whether I was ready for the next step, Lynn told me I needed to make a leap of faith rather than wait or expect to feel entirely ready. We had one short conversation, but then she didn't let go. She stayed interested and encouraging until I took that leap. It was just one leap, but the lesson has stayed with me, and I've taken many leaps since. Now I intend to do the same for Hannah, to help her grow, to take those steps so that she becomes all she could be as a nurse leader. And as we reflect on these stories, I think there are some themes that emerge. And my first theme is about holding ourselves back, because we tell ourselves all sorts of stories, don't we? That this is all I can do, that I've reached my ceiling, I've been in this role too long to change now. Nursing will have changed so much while I've been away doing something different, I won't be able to cope, and no one will want me anyway. By telling ourselves these stories, we lose the confidence to change what we do or where we work. We effectively get in our own way. By telling ourselves these stories, we're looking backwards and we're looking sideways. We're looking where we've been and where we already are. Imagine if we look forwards and if we look up, we will see where we could be. My second theme is that to progress, we need to make some big and scary jumps sometimes. Lynn pushed me and then she supported me. The pandemic response pushed Andrea and then her new NHS colleagues supported her. The NHS and Nuffield Health nurses working together at Woking, Plymouth and Ipswich had to take a leap and then they supported each other. And there are numerous other stories I could have told you. My final theme is that having taken a leap, there are tremendous rewards. It could be the confidence to take another bigger leap, the confidence to just stretch and grow, to forge ahead, maybe to change direction. And those are the individual rewards. But think about the collective rewards if we're taking those leaps and making those changes together. How much could we improve health and change healthcare for the better? So hold that thought. I'm going to come back to it. Let's just remind ourselves of Kurt Litwin's change model. To change the shape of an ice cube efficiently, you need to unfreeze it, move, and then reshape it. So my observation is that individually and collectively, the pandemic has unfrozen us. Individually and collectively, it has forced us to change shape, to work in different ways, in different places, and across boundaries we thought we would never cross. And if individually and collectively we are changing shape, then individually and collectively we have an opportunity to shape that change and to influence whatever next. But with that opportunity comes a responsibility. And that's the responsibility to seize the opportunity, not just let it pass. The responsibility to get involved, to work together, to mobilise the voice of nursing and midwifery in health policy agendas, to raise our voices to lead, to improve health globally by raising the profile and status of nurses worldwide, influencing policymakers and supporting nurses themselves to lead, learn and build a global movement. And to recognise and celebrate all that's great about our profession on an international level. Shine a spotlight on all that's great about nursing and midwifery leaders, as we need to honour Florence Nightingale's legacy. But there is something else that could be a barrier to our progress, to our ability to make those leaps. And I think it's this. With such a global shortage of nurses, it's not surprising that different sectors and indeed different organisations within the same sector hunker down and we do all we can to hang on to our workforce. And my observation and experience is that too often we allow the negative messages to take hold, or indeed we actively use them in order to discourage someone from changing direction, sector, or even country. So it's not just a lack of individual confidence that prevents us taking a leap, but sometimes our collective resistance, all for good reasons, but it sometimes holds us all back. So another story from the pandemic response is about Tom. Tom is the theatre manager at Shern Clinic, and he too, with some trepidation, was seconded into the Nightingale Hospital in London, where he too enjoyed working with NHS and other independent sector colleagues. He developed strong relationships with the theatre team from One London NHS Trust, and they are now partnering with Shern Clinic in an orthopaedic patient pathway. So without that rather enforced leap across a boundary by Tom, this partnership would never have happened, but it has, and both the NHS and Shern Clinic and the patients are benefiting. Now back to Nuffield Health, and this is Pamela. I'm very sorry to lose Pamela, one of our hospital matrons. Pamela joined us from the NHS. She's progressed with us, and she's now moving to a yet more senior role back in the NHS. Pamela is a fabulous hospital matron, and I'd love her to stay, but I couldn't be more delighted that she's moving on, because this is how it should be. Frictionless borders or no borders at all, so that nurses move freely as part of their growth and development, and every sector benefits from a richer mix of leadership experience. For me, this is not either or, either social care or hospital care, either primary or secondary, either independent sector or NHS. No, it's not either or, it's and. A nursing career in the NHS and in the independent sector, in primary care and secondary care, in the military and in social care. Now, I'm not suggesting that we all become generalists or jacks of all trades, but even once highly specialised, we can still take that leap and still change direction. And it's not only to share our skills and knowledge or to progress, but move to stay fresh and energised and loving what we do. Loving what we do rather than getting stale, worn out, bored or demoralised. Maybe even falling out of love with nursing and leaving the profession altogether. So the handful of stories I've told illustrate that we are courageous. We face into the unexpected and into challenges brilliantly when we do it together. We go where our skills are needed rather than where we're comfortable. We learn fast and we thrive when we support each other across sectors. Globally, nationally and locally, we have united against a common threat, the COVID virus, and this will remain a strong bond between us for a long time. But it isn't our only bond. Our commitment to health, as well as to healthcare, unites us. Our focus on populations and our patients unites us, and Florence Nightingale's legacy unites us. Collectively and individually, this gives us such strength and such power. So I think back to Ruth May's call to action in March. This is our time. The response to the COVID-19 pandemic has been a supreme multidisciplinary team effort, but collectively, nurses are at the heart of it, and I could not be more proud of my profession than I am right now. My stories show how we've thrived on being forced out of our comfort zones, how we can cross boundaries and find new creative ways of working together. And I know that you'll all be able to reflect on similar stories from your own experiences. My perception now is that our individual and collective self-confidence has grown. Now our ambition for nurses, nursing, healthcare and health creation should grow too. So I picture this as us riding the crest of a wave, a strong and powerful wave that could carry us forward. Or we could just slide off the back of it and passively paddle about waiting for another one to come along. I hope not, because we've such an opportunity right now to ride the crest of this wave, to direct its energy, to boost our ambitions and to take nursing forward. So this hasn't been quite how we thought we would be celebrating the 200th anniversary of the birth of Florence Nightingale, nor indeed the International Year of the Nurse and Midwife. But in a strange kind of way, it has been, and it continues to be, the most extraordinary opportunity for all of us to honour her memory, her achievements, and to celebrate nurses and nursing. Healthcare is always changing, but that change is accelerated by the impact of this pandemic. So what is our role as nurses, as the fixers, as the planners? What is our role in policy making, in delivery, in our communities and at the bedside? With our confidence, with our voice, we are part of this, and we must be part of it, and we must seize this opportunity. What will your part be? How will you ride the crest of this wave? How will you look forward and up to where you could be, to where we could be? I can't presume to answer that for you or for us, but I can presume to know that this is our time, and it's very, very exciting. Thank you.
Carol, that was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. I was riveted, and I'm sure most people are. And I think if we were in our auditorium of 4,000 nurses and midwives, that would have made a standing ovation. So thank you very much. Thank you for the pride that you've given and you've shown us today. At one point I had a big lump in my throat and I thought, I hope she doesn't finish now because I wouldn't be able to speak. But what a story, what a collection of stories that totally exemplifies what nurses and midwives have done during this COVID-19 crisis, how we've worked collectively, how we've created new relationships, partnerships. And your final slide, this is our time. Gosh, if ever was a time, today, now is that time. So thank you, Carol. Thank you for spending this time with us today. And I'm sure if there are any questions to you, we can pick these up in a while. So thank you. Well done.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Just everyone now, there is a break in the conference proceedings for half an hour. So from 11 till 11:30 we will break. It's your opportunity to look at any of the 38 spoken presentations we have on the YouTube channel, and please explore these presentations have come across from all over the world, so some will be very relevant to your areas of practice. So come back at 11:30 and then we start our third panel session, and this time our panel session is on the track called Impact. So come back at 11:30, have a welcome break, a nice cup of coffee, and we'll see you at 11:30. Thank you.